European citizens in Niger continue to arrive at Niamey Airport waiting to be evacuated.
2 airplanes landed in Paris overnight, 2 more expected to land there on Wednesday afternoon. The evacuations come after the military junta overthrew Niger's democratically elected leader, Mohamed Bazoum, a week ago.
Meanwhile, a delegation from West African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS, is expected to hold talks with military leaders today. On Sunday, ECOWAS imposed trade and financial sanctions and gave the coup leaders a week to reinstate Niger's democratically elected president or face potential use of force. Well, let's stay then with the story. For greater insights into it, we're joined by Advocate Sipho Mantula, a researcher at the Thabo Mbeki School of Public and International Affairs. Advocate Mantula, good evening to you. Thanks for your time on the story. It's been incredible watching it unfold. Not only that the coup has taken place, but that, that military hold sort of remains intact even up until today.
No, evening, Sis Katie, and even to the viewers. Indeed, Sis Katie, if one looks at that, it's almost a week since that military coup that happened in Niger. But let's look at the patterns of the military coups in that country. They might have started in 1960, but also in 2021, 48 hours just before Bazoum was inaugurated into office, there was an attempted military coup. Looking at the region, for the past 4 years, we had 7 coups. So if one looks at the region, the push and the pull factors of Niger also, it goes to 2 or 3 factors that other international security experts have been raising. One of them is the issue of ethnicity, legitimacy of Bazoum as the president even during elections of 2021. The second aspect being the foreign military bases that are in Niger. As we have mentioned, the French, the USA moving out their foreign nationals. And the third one being, I think, what we have always been worried about, regional organizations, the African Union, ECOWAS, as the military generals are meeting today also in Abuja, still saying the same sentiments of Sunday, that their last resort will be the military intervention. And we have seen also developments happening overnight, that 5 borders have been opened amongst the neighboring countries of Niger, Mali, Libya, Algeria. So for me, Sis Katie, is that developments have been moving, but at the same time, we have also seen this solidarity amongst the military coups general in support of General Tachini of Niger after even taking over the government last week, Wednesday.
Advocate Mantula, you raise an important issue there, and it's really around the instability of the region as a whole and the influence of, I don't know whether to say Western interests within that region, and how that in and of itself is fueling that instability. How do you think that what tangible intervention do you think that area needs now to have more sustainable peace?
I think it has been the deficit and the failure of democratic values within ECOWAS region. Secondly, the military and civilian relations. How does the military leadership and the state politicians relate? And thirdly, the needs of the citizens. And I think the other one that we have to look into is the development of these countries that are also struggling with energy, struggling with how to maintain their economies. But as you have said earlier, what can be the key solution? I think the military intervention is not the solution. One will look at the political and the social climate and the changes that must be brought by the citizens, must be brought also by the political parties that are active in that country. But for us to look at foreign military intervention, look at the role of the Russians, look at the role of the French, I don't think it will bring help. But also, it shows, it unmasks how many Western African countries have been subject to their former colonial masters in terms of exploiting even their resources. Because let's look at Niger. It's got ample of minerals. It's got uranium that France has been exploiting for many years. But we have not been talking about it. And secondly, like I said, I still go back to that issue that of the deficit of democratic spaces and values in West Africa, and hence we have militarization of democracy beginning as early as 2019.
There is also an important aspect that I think we need to look at here when it comes to the interventions, and it's the extent to which the decisions that are made by ECOWAS as a bloc, including where they have sent military intervention into some of the other countries that have faced coups, the extent to which those decisions have the buy-in of the people in those regions. Because it seems to me that there is somewhat of a disconnect between what happens among the political and security elites versus what would be the expectations of just ordinary citizens.
No, correctly. And I think that's why we are missing the link between politics, democracy, security. And secondly, as we have alluded, when ECOWAS take decision, you ask yourself, was there civil society input? And thirdly, when you look at decisions taken by ECOWAS recently, last week, Sunday, and today, you have other dissenting members of ECOWAS who are actually defying ECOWAS, like Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea-Conakry, defying ECOWAS as the regional body. The African Union was part of the meeting on Sunday, but we ask ourselves, what then is the role of the African Union Peace and Security Council, South Africa being one of its members, also beyond issuing media statements? Because I think that public diplomacy also must include civic diplomacy. How do we involve the citizens who are affected by these military coups? Because these military coups also tend to also frustrate development, and at the same time also you find anti-sentiments of the French, and also this loyalty towards the Russians. When you see the flags as a symbol, we see the burning of the embassies. But I think it still goes back to that question that I've said, that the ECOWAS and the AU has failed to can popularize the African Charter on elections, democracy, and governance. Hence, I said, you can talk of security, you can talk of military, but if you don't talk of governance, you don't talk of democratization, democratic spaces, and the freedom of the media. As you know, that Niger, as we speak now, is being cut off the grid now. It's almost 70%. They don't have power. And at the same time, you have sanctions, which I will sometimes call them not strategic sanctions. They are sometimes the nonsensical sanctions that affect ordinary people. And that's where I can say to you, we are not going to have a clear solution, because it appears that military principles overtakes the people's voices.
Those military principles you speak about have also infiltrated the way in which democracy is being effected, Advocate Mantula, because on the one hand, you have the very military that is brought in to help run elections, have some kind of stability, but in the same breath, it is that military that then is going to be behind some of the coups that we see, just like we're talking about with Niger right now. Is this really an acknowledgement of the fact that while democracy, by and large, is a great idea, and many of these countries would say that they subscribe to democracy, the capacity institutionally to make democracies work, that perhaps is not present, and that's where the true building needs to happen if there's ever to be stability?
No, correctly. Remember that the issue of militarization of politics in the Sahel has been there since the 60s and the 70s. Hence, earlier when I was alluding on the patterns and the history of the coups that have happened there. Also, the issue of living conditions of the military, presidential guards, and also one thing that I think I might have missed, Katie, I've looked at the 4 generals who have gone through military coups. Their training, their education, also come from the West, and that worries some of us, that all these generals that people revere, people start to worship now, they have all got their training from the US. So you ask yourself, was there no balance of understanding the role of the military as those who are the first and the last guard of the state in terms of protecting the national sovereignty? They become now the obstacles, or obstructionist of democracy. So one looks at that, maybe the African Union and the ECOWAS need to redefine the role of the military, the role of the civilian and the military relations. Hence, I kept on raising this issue of the military and civilian relations. Hence, we are stuck with the question in Khartoum even today, in Sudan, where we have rapacious generals who are ravaging on the war and undermining the voice of the citizens. Also in the Niger, we find that the generals are also looking at their own interest, their own stability. Hence, others are saying there was a rumor of that there was a fallout between the head of the presidential guard and President Bazoum actually last week. And also President Bazoum failing to go to Russia by attending that summit. He opted to be having his loyalty to the French. When the French were chased out of Mali, he asked the French army to come into Niger. So there's also the question of the former colonizer and the colonized. How do they manage this democratic space?
Advocate Sipho Mantula, thank you so much for your time tonight. He is a researcher at the Thabo Mbeki School of Public and International Affairs.